There's something about winners that they don't depend on every call being perfect. They don't depend even on momentum. They're able to play 100% whatever it is they're playing, whether they think that the circumstances are going their way or they're not. We get so obsessed with the opportunity itself or the thing that we think we want without realizing that when you disconnect and you just do this, you let go, life has a way of positioning you perfectly for whatever the next thing is.
What if you could build a business in the modern world as big or as small as you want without having to compromise the things that were the most important to you in the very beginning? This is the Wealthy Consultant Talks podcast with Taylor Welch and Mike Walker, as they share with you today their learning lessons from stories in their experiences over the past 10 to 15 years and share with you right here, right now. Let's get into it.
Who's ready to hop into today's session? We're going to talk this is on failure. We're going to talk about failure today. Specifically, ways to reverse and flip failure around. How many of you would say, I would love to turn what normal mortals call obstacles into fuel? Hopefully you want that. That's what I would like to do anyways. You can tell instantly. I'm watching the US Open this weekend, and you can tell the people who thrive off of adversity versus the people who don't. There's something about winners. It's like whether they're behind or whether there's plays that don't go their way, whether they're getting bad calls, no matter what it is. Football recently kicked back up. There's something about winners that they don't depend on every call being perfect. They don't depend even on momentum. They're able to play 100%, whatever it is they're playing, whether they think that the circumstances are going their way or they're not. I'll tell you this, when you look through people's lives, the most successful of us are oftentimes those of us who have the largest sized obstacles. And if you feel like you're kind of coasting through and you don't have that much that's tripping you up or be problematic for you, then it's probably you have to look in the mirror and say, my vision might not be the size that it could be and should be. In counter of that, if you're going through seasons where it's obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, is indication that you have a really big mission and there's likely a lot of resistance towards that. So we're going to do a little bit of a study. If you're taking notes on anything that we're talking about today, you can just write on failure at the very top. And I'll just dive right in here. The Napoleon Hill is where I'm pulling some of this literature from. And he went through an exercise where he went back and looked at his past failures. He cataloged essentially the areas where he had failed. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but it's really interesting when you actually go back with the intention of examining the things that felt like failures in the moment, but they turned out to be huge wins. So I've got some questions for you today. This is going to be interactive, more of an interactive type of session, because I'm not documenting a person's entire life. I'm just teaching. So let me ask you this. Can you think of a time in your life when something bad happened and in hindsight, it turned out to be the best thing ever? Most of us are going to say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Obviously. Think about to friendships that didn't make it. And in the moment I was like, wow, nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I have no friends. And it's like, wow, I'm really glad that I disconnected from this. Or you go through events where it's like, I lost my job. Somebody fired me. I was talking with my dad, who's writing a book right now, and he reminded me, as parents often do, of my first job that I got fired from. I can't imagine anybody firing me. What an idiot, first of all. But they did for whatever reason. And it was a dry cleaners. And I was fixing something in their systems and they didn't think that it needed fixed. And so I fixed it, then they fired me. And it turned out to be an amazing thing. I've gotten fired from jobs. I've lost great relationships. I have moved cities to take opportunities that I thought was my destiny. And it turned out that it wasn't my destiny. But my God, if I wouldn't have been in that city, I wouldn't have had the next opportunity. And I had to be in the city. You know what I'm saying? We get so obsessed with the opportunity itself or the thing that we think we want without realizing that when you disconnect and you just do this, you let go, life has a way of positioning you perfectly for whatever the next thing is. And so Napoleon sits down and he looks back at his life and he goes through every single failure that he felt like were catastrophic and existential at the time, but with the perfect lens of hindsight, he's able to see these were not failures, these were wins. I did not lose something. I was protected from something. I wasn't moved backwards. I was repositioned. You can reframe them when you're looking backwards. The past exists to serve your definition of the future. And we don't have time to get into that right now, but this is a worthy exercise. You should do this about once a quarter, I think. Is just look back, flip the lessons, flip the failures into lessons. If a failure is not a failure, but it's a lesson, it doesn't sting as bad. And so he's sitting down and he has 7 of them, and we'll talk about them today. There's a couple of quotes that I want to share with you before we even get into them, because I think that they're really appropriate. He says, sound character. Sound character. What is sound character? This means a character that has proper infrastructure. It has the right materials and the right puzzle pieces are fitting together. So a person's character, which by the way is bigger than just one area of their life, character is foundational. Character covers every single aspect of a person's life, relationships, business, decisions, etc. He says, sound character is usually the handiwork of reverses and setbacks and temporary defeat. Reverses, setbacks, and temporary defeat, which the uninformed part of the world calls failure. And I want to draw a distinction real fast when he says uninformed. Don't think he's meaning uneducated. I think he's talking about uninformed. And how do you get yourself informed? You sit down and you properly look backwards. So everyone is like a fan in this crew, at least, of the morning formula. And how do I set my future? How do I look towards the future? How do I create the future? But we're not doing a good enough job looking backwards and reminding ourselves, even at a subconscious level, that everything that hurts in the moment prepares us in the long term. And it's something you have to learn how to do. And so I've been, basic tactical. So I've been journaling every day since like 2013. My first journal entry ever is a picture of a brand new puppy that me and my wife got. We were in a $650, $700 apartment in Cordova, Tennessee. It flooded every year. And I was so thankful for that puppy and for our apartment. And we were living on our own and our lives legitimately sucked, but it was our lives and I was grateful for it. And when I'm able to look back and see this is where I've come from, it gives me staying power for whatever it is I'm going through right now. Is in the moment you feel like you're physically going to die. Like if you're going through failure right now, you just feel like you are just going to die. But when you look backwards, you get staying power. There's another quote. He says, these are lessons that can only be learned through defeat. Some lessons you only learn by getting beat. So once again, talking about these tennis players, and you can tell that they have won so much and lost so much that they don't really care. They're connected to them playing the best game that they can. They're not necessarily connected just to the outcome. They're disappointed, sure, but some lessons you can only learn through defeat. And the players who have lost the most, even if only in practice, they're the ones who are best at playing. What looked to be a failure was nothing more than a kindly, unseen hand that halted me in my chosen course, and with great wisdom forced me to redirect my efforts along more advantageous pathways. Think about this right now. This is private, personal. You don't have to put it in the chat, but I want you to write it down somewhere else. Think of at least one scenario where you were trying to achieve something, and if you would have achieved that thing, you would have missed out on something really, really, really important to you. This is what he's talking about. What looked to be a failure was nothing more than a kindly, unseen hand that halted me in my chosen course, and with great wisdom forced me to redirect my efforts along a more advantageous pathway. So every single person on this call has this experience where you have tried to do something, and because it didn't work, you met somebody. Because it didn't work, you got repositioned somewhere else. Because it didn't work, you learned something that you wouldn't have had time to learn prior. You've been redirected in a more advantageous pathway. And this is the last quote before we get into the lessons. He says, I arrived at this decision only after I had taken a retrospective view of my experiences and had analyzed them in the light of many years of sober and meditative thought. What's the point of this quote in here? It means you're going to have to work a little bit for this. Sorry. There's no cheat, easy bake options for you pulling lessons from your failures. You're just going to have to sit down and do it. If you're too busy to retroactively examine this types of material, you're too busy to succeed. That's the bottom line. And so as leaders, we have to find time for this. We have to find time to sit down and examine backwards, just like we do when we examine forwards in the future. So his first turning point, he has a job as a stenographer and a bookkeeper. His first turning point, he's got a job as a stenographer, and he keeps this job, and he's a bookkeeper for 5 years, and he's moving up, and he's feeling good, and his employer, the person who he works for, loses his fortune and has to close down the business, and he has to find something different. So he says that this failure felt really bad in the short term because he had lost his job. If you've ever lost your job, it's a pretty unfortunate situation or scenario. But his next job that he only would have found if he needed the job, we realize that. Like Napoleon only goes into this next job because he loses the last job. How simple is that? It's basic. But how many, like, we never think about it. We're like, well, you never would have moved into the next opportunity if you were obsessed with the last one. So his next job is a sales manager. He gets a sales manager position at a large lumber company, and he starts advancing. You got to think Napoleon Hill is a very outspoken, confident type of person, and he's pretty much willing to just do whatever. And so he starts advancing, because when you find people who have the chemical makeup of, like, they'll just do stuff and they'll operate outside of even what they feel they're paid to do, and they'll just kind of take over, you're like, let's promote this person. So he gets promoted, but he starts feeling like he's indomitable. And he writes this. He finds this in his letters and journals, and he's talking about this. He's like, I started feeling on top of the world. And this is the quote he writes at the end of his life. To stand on the top of the world gives one a wonderful sensation, but it is a very dangerous place to stand unless one stands very firmly, because the fall is so long and hard if one should stumble. So this is the first time that Napoleon starts piecing together a familiar pattern that, and we know this today. This is have you seen this chart where it's like the up and down and up and down and up and down in the life of an entrepreneur, and everybody thinks it's a straight line from the left to the right. But what it really is you get up, you fall and almost die, but you don't, and you hobble up the next one, then you fall and almost die. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
So this is basically the first representation of that, where he's like, yo, I'm noticing a pattern here. And the pattern is, when I get to the top of the hill, I fall off of the hill. And he incorrectly attributes this as, like, watch out for standing on the top of the world. And this is just because, in my opinion, Napoleon doesn't have access to neuroscience. He doesn't have access to the brain's pattern recognition machine. They don't really understand mirror neurons. They don't really understand memetics, like mimetic desire. And so we're reading this from a guy who's obviously Napoleon Hill is world famous, but they don't have access to the same level of mechanics and biology and the training that we do. And so he says that to stand on the top of the world is a wonderful thing, but it's a very dangerous place to stand. I think that that's probably false. I think what he's talking about is, like, hey, for some reason, every time right before I fell off of the top of the mountain, I was up on the mountain. Well, this is more of an issue of physics than it is identity. Does this make sense? Well, I'm trying to correct parts of the narrative if you go and read this. He says, up until that time, and this is his second turning point, up until that time, it had never occurred to me that success could be measured in terms other than money and authority. This is more of the attribution for why he's failing. He's about to fail. Is actually an improper definition of success. And so watch out when your definition of success begins slowly tilting. and you find more meaning in the Rolex than you do Monday morning getting to the office. Just watch out for this, because it happens so subtly and it happens very quickly. All of a sudden, if you're flying private, you feel like you have succeeded. If you're flying commercial, you do not. If you have a nice house, you feel like you have crushed it. If you do not, you do not. Watch out for this little distinction, which basically says that I am more addicted to the prize than I am the process, because that's actually the real attribution for when you're about to probably fall down the mountain. So he's doing this stuff. He's crushing it. All he cares about is money and authority. And he's at the top of the mountain. And then 1907 hits. Anybody remember what happened in 1907? There's a big financial panic, and it crushed the business. And he resets all the way back to zero. Now, I don't know what Napoleon Hill was doing with his money, but it's very clear to me that he wasn't actually doing the right thing with his money. He was probably spending it on stuff, because he keeps talking about, I was reset back to zero. Well, it is every time you get reset, you shouldn't actually reset back down to zero. It's not the goal.
No, yeah.
It's like, let's talk about last year. Let's talk about this for me. I went from booming companies at the end of 2021, and they began to decline. I did not know how to keep them from declining. I did not know how to protect them. Even after I had moved on, there have been areas where I'm like, oh my God, I am literally factually broke. Well, I'm actually not broke. I'm not resetting to zero, but I'm resetting back to a level that I no longer feel comfortable with because of my experience. But keep this in mind. Every time you reset, your baseline should bump up a little bit. And so the thing about the mind is that if somebody goes from making $1 million a year to $2 million a year, what does it feel like? Incredible, euphoric. I'm rich. I'll never have to worry about money again. But if you go from $10 million a year down to $7 million a year, you feel like you're physically dying. It's a regression that human beings hate more than the actual level or the actual number. We hate regression. So I don't know if he's talking about here, did he actually reset back to zero? If he did, he doesn't know what he's doing, or if he just felt like he was being reset back to zero. But the moral of the story, if the story is that he's being reset, and he says that the 1907 panic basically took away his job. It completely diverted his efforts from the lumber business to the study of law. Let's just draw an interesting distinction for a second. Let's talk about identity. How many of you have made the mistake of tying your identity to what you do? Super American way of like doing stuff. Hey, Mike, I'm Taylor. What do you do?
What do you do? I was just going to say.
What do you do?
One of the first things that comes out of people's mouths.
It's like all we care about. What do you do? What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? And we judge the race based on what do you do? We judge the status based on what do you do? We judge people based on like, well, do you do something cool? Do you not do something cool? And if you don't do something cool, then you must be a failure because what you do is who you are. No. It's a heuristic that we have to watch out for. And so Napoleon Hill is like, he's like, how many of you have had like a business and something and you're like, this is what I'm called to do. And I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to be the biggest and baddest everywhere. Well, be careful not to tie too much of your identity into what you do, but rather let what you do come out of what your identity is, say who you are. This is why we have values training inside the morning formula stuff. We didn't used to have that, but we've added it because it's important for you to know who are you. And then as a byproduct of that, what do you do? So he gets out of the lumber business and he has his efforts redirected into the study of law. And he's an automobile salesman during the day. He's going to law school at night. He's pulling double duty. You can't escape this. There are going to be seasons of your life where no matter what, you are pulling double duty, some of you triple duty. And there's nothing wrong with you for pulling double duty. I think that sometimes we have to watch out for the pendulum swings. You have some people who are online who are like, man, you should just grind every day, work on Saturdays, work on Sundays, don't be poor. You have some people who are like, man, I just love one-person businesses and lifestyle brands. whatever it is that you feel you should be doing as a result of who you are, that's what you should be doing.